You've heard me tell you what I think about the LA Kings so far this season, but it's time to get another voice, an impartial voice, if you will. We welcome in longtime NHL writer Eric Stevens from The Athletic to get his thoughts on the LA Kings. That's next on this edition of Locked on LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked on LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. We are at 828 subscribers at last check, and we appreciate your help in trying to get to our next goal of 900 by the end of November. Please and thank you. My name is Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked on LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years, for the past 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show. That's been putting out content for the past 16 years. And as you well know, a very passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Another man that has over 30 years of experience working for newspapers and media outlets is Eric Stevens of The Athletic. He's done good work for the Orange County Register and the LA Times. He's been an NHL Network contributor, and he's covered the Anaheim Ducks for many years. He said, you know what? I need a bigger challenge. I'm going to cover two NHL teams this season. He's also covering the LA Kings as well. And we welcome in Eric Stevens of The Athletic. Eric, thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you about some LA Kings hockey today.
Yeah, hey, Eddie, thanks for bringing me on. I'm looking forward to it as well. And like you alluded to it, it's a little bit of a new endeavor. I've watched the Kings from afar for many years whatsoever, but obviously now being there on a more day-to-day basis and whatsoever, and getting a closer look, so far it's been an interesting ride in terms of kind of learning more and more about the intricacies of the organization.
Yeah, for sure. And, we've had some good guests on so far, but I am looking forward to getting your opinion on the Kings because, frankly, you're an impartial observer to all this. We've talked to guys like Jim Fox and Daryl Evans, and I'm obviously an unabashed Kings fan, but I'm wondering if you're seeing the same things we're seeing so far. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So let me start off by asking a very simple but maybe complex question. Who are the LA Kings this year? Because this is not a team I recognize so far, whether it's scoring, and I know they brought in Kevin Fiala and some of the young guys making a step forward, but defensively, I certainly don't recognize this team either. So who are these guys so far?
You know what? I'm not sure that the Kings themselves know who they are. And, alluding to that, Todd McLellen has said several times, really from day one, the regular season, that they're still trying to figure out their identity. I don't know if you want to be, I don't know if you want that 12 games in or 14 games in now. But yeah, I don't think we really clearly know, who they are. You alluded to it, Eddie. This is a more, so far offensively productive group. It's a more dangerous group. I mean, the addition of Fiala adds to that, and they are doing some other things, and you're seeing some growth in some other areas to where they are scoring more, but at some of it at the cost of being a little more open offensively is the fact that they have been more leaky on the defensive side. They haven't been as tight. I shouldn't say really leaky. I mean, in some games that's been the case. I think overall they're still playing a pretty sound game for the most part, but there have been breakdowns. There have been more breakdowns, this year than ever, or at least than last year. It has cost them, in certain games. Is this going to be a long-term problem? I don't know. We'll see. Again, Todd has said, he's trying to figure out what are we going to do? Are we going to be the type of team that's going to win games 5-4, or are they going to be more like what he prefers and what like they've been, which is a tightly structured, sound team at both ends, offensively and defensively. They're a little bit more, they obviously wanted to be a more open attack, and we're seeing some results of that, but they want to be much more of a lockdown unit and structured unit in their own end.
I like Todd McLellen, and I think he's done a pretty good job so far, but I'm not sure how I feel about his comments, because to me, it's like he's saying, well, we'll see what they want to do. And I'm like, well, aren't you supposed to tell them what to do? Aren't they supposed to following your direction? Because and I get it. Once they're on the ice, it's up to them. He can't do it for them. They've got to do it. But it seems like he's almost saying like, well, we'll see what they decide to do.
You know what? Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, because that's a thought that has run through my mind. It's one thing to say that, maybe, in the first week or after the first couple of, it's one thing to say that after that 7-6 win in Minnesota or whatsoever. It's another thing when you're continually saying that, the same things pop up, in another week or the next month or whatsoever. Then that's where it's like, okay, the message that you're trying to get past or get through, is it getting through? Not only to the fan base, but obviously, most importantly to the players. As you said, they're the ones that perform. They've got to be the ones that get it done on the ice. But yeah, it is interesting that you point that out, because it is something that has run through my mind in terms of really finding that definitive identity of this group.
So I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, I think the Kings are moving in the right direction. It does seem like at times they are a team that'll take 2 steps forwards and then 1 step back. But do you feel like in the last couple of weeks that things are trending in the right direction?
Little by little, I do. I don't think I've seen too much of a backslide recently. There have been some well played games. I mean, obviously they beat Toronto recently. Had a nice win over Tampa. On the road trip there, obviously winning in St. Louis. I know St. Louis has had its issues, or whatsoever. The game in Dallas, yeah, it was bad. They were bad, but sometimes I chalk that up to a schedule loss. I mean, Dallas was sitting there waiting for 3 or 4 days. The Kings were on a back-to-back, on the road. Sometimes those are almost unavoidable, in a schedule or whatsoever. Should they have beaten Chicago? I mean, yeah, of course, but they actually played a pretty tight defensive game, there. And then obviously they come back on Saturday and beat a pretty good Florida, at least a very good, very talented Florida team. So it's, I do think that they're making strides, and it is still early. I mean, it'd be one thing if they were in a big hole, and then you can chuck out the early, stuff or whatsoever. Then you can say, okay, there needs to be some more urgency here whatsoever, but they're not. They're making incremental strides, I think, particularly on the defensive side of the puck. I think they have been a little bit better, in general. One thing, Eddie, what I'll be interested in to see, and I've asked this recently. I think I asked Todd this the other day, and even other coaches in general. The scoring that you see that's up in the league, is that going to be sustainable for throughout the year, or is it going to be just more like most years where it's up early, and then coaches, get their systems in and they coach the offense out of teams, and then we'll see more of the 3-2 games that we're accustomed to seeing. I'll be interested to see that, because if this is going to be a year where maybe you have to score 4 goals to win games, whereas usually the barometer was if you score 3, generally your chances of winning are very high as long as you play a sound, tight defensive game. But maybe this is the year where you may have to get that extra goal and you may have to score 4 to win more games this year.
You've covered the NHL for a long time. I know this is your first year covering the Kings, but at what point is it no longer early? I mean, I do agree with you. It is still early in the season, but at what point do you say, you know what, it's not really early anymore? Are we getting close to that mark?
November obviously is sort of a key month where it kind of goes toward that. It's no longer okay. First couple of weeks we've got 70 games left on the schedule whatsoever. The barometer usually is Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving, the late November. That's generally the area where you see, okay, the teams that are in playoff position usually stay, and those that are outside of it, very few times, are those who are outside of playoff position at that point able to jump into a spot whatsoever. So to me, I think that's where urgency really kind of starts to take hold and starts to set in, and that's where you really start to look at standings, position whatsoever. Again, it'd be different if they were in a big hole right now. If they were at 5-12-1 or whatsoever, then okay, there would be some real consternation. But they're not. I mean, they're sort of hanging around right now, so hanging around that outside side. I do think though that the earlier that they can start putting together wins, putting together good performances, putting together a stretch over 10 games where maybe they go 7-3, 8-2, something like that. That's where you start to see movement, and whatsoever. And that's what's necessary to be a playoff team. You need to be able to put those stretches together through the course of a long season.
We're going to get Eric Stevens' thoughts on some of the individuals that have shined so far this year for the Kings. Kevin Fiala, Gabe Vilardi. We'll talk to him about Brandt, Clarke. But real quick first, did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglary and package thefts spike nationally? We call them porch pirates around this parts. That's why your friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system at half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. It's really cool. You can control your system from your phone with an app. It's crystal clear HD security cameras you can watch. And if you can't watch, no problem. There are 24/7 professional monitoring agents using Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify threats. They even have hazard sensors that detect fire, floods, and other threats to your home. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that I recommend. Get 50% off any SimpliSafe security system. SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnNHL today is where you need to go. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That is SimpliSafe.com/LockedOnNHL. There is no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, more with Eric Stevens from The Athletic. And Eric, I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the key players we've seen so far. A new player in Kevin Fiala, a player we know well, but has suddenly burst onto the scene in Gabe Vilardi, and a young rookie in Brandt, Clarke, who I think is going to be staying with the team. He hasn't played that 10th game yet, but any thoughts on those three players specifically?
Well, you know what? Let's start with Kevin Fiala. I think right now he's doing what they brought him here to do, which is to be a dynamic presence and to be an offensive producer. Right now he's at a point per game. And I think if that holds up, over the course of the season, and he's an 80-point guy, I think that's exactly what the Kings were looking for when they went out and acquired him. What I find is interesting with him, and chalk it up right now so far to Todd and the staff making a good move, is moving him to that third line. At the time, it was seen, maybe as, it's a demotion. They're taking, Fiala off the top line with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe. But I think moving him to the third line, actually, it has made him the lead dog on that line, and now giving them dangerous threats on three lines as opposed to two or whatsoever. And as we know, the deeper you can make a lineup, the more where you can have scoring potential, more lines that have scoring potential whatsoever. That's going to really, I think, carry you over the long haul. And so I think with him, it's been working in the sense that when he was with Anze and Adrian, maybe he was more trying to fit in with what they do, or whatsoever. And not that it did. I mean, there were some times when it worked, but I think moving him to the third line, obviously now he's playing with Carl Grundstrom and Rasmus Kupari right now, but he's the lead dog. and they're playing off of him. And I think, and he's a guy that needs the puck. He's a guy that needs the puck, and he doesn't have to share it with, the two up top there. He can be the guy, and those two youngsters can work off of him. And so I think that's been working right now, in terms of, again, deepening that lineup and whatsoever. You mentioned Brandt Clarke. Brandt Clarke. That's an interesting one. I've seen in other instances where, they've had young players play those 9 games, and then they're able to stretch that. They're able to stretch their stay out, longer. I hate to bring up my Anaheim days here whatsoever, but I like in a recent example. I remember when Max Comtois, kind of first came up. He played 9 games. They were able to stretch it though to where he was able to fit in 2 or 3 games at the AHL level with on a conditioning assignment, or something to that nature. And they stretched it out to where they kept him up until the World Juniors, and then sent him back to his junior team after that tournament. I wonder if maybe something sort of similar, is at work or whatsoever. Clearly, they're trying to stretch his stay here, and they feel like maybe it's more beneficial for him to stay around the team, even though he's not in the lineup night to night or whatsoever. The fact that he's practicing with players that he's eventually going to be playing with on a more regular basis, theoretically beginning next year, maybe later this year. We'll see. But these are guys that are going to be, playing with. Maybe they feel like it's better for him to be around, to be in this atmosphere, practicing with them regularly, whatsoever, than, going back to, the Barrie Colts and what he would get out of that experience. But he's so far. We know what he's very talented. He's a very talented performer. You can see the offensive mindset, the offensive ability, the way he processes things. In that end, how the creativity. I've seen that. Really from the get-go, from rookie camp on through training camp, and even in some flash moments. In the 9 games that he's played, his defense is going to, it will have to come around. I don't think he's been terrible defensively. There have been a few occasions where you see where the game, particularly in his own end and defending in front of the net, where, there's indecision, on occasion. But playing defense is a difficult thing in the NHL, and they typically say it takes about 300 games for someone to really sort of master it. So it's going to be a process whatsoever, but he's going to be a key player, really for the future, for this Kings franchise.
And I know you've been around the game a lot. You've seen players maybe get off to a hot start. It doesn't feel like that to me with Gabe Vilardi. It feels like this is something he can sustain because of the way he's scoring goals and the skill he's shown so far and the confidence that we haven't seen from him so far in his young career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I asked him a few games ago about the confidence thing, and he sort of brushed it off or poo-pooed it a little bit or whatsoever. But it's obvious to anyone who's even watching or whatsoever how much it's oozing out of him, or whatsoever. I mean, here's someone who, full credit to him, came in, had a very good summer. Training, went back home over the summer. He said that he thought that was a real good thing for him to do, to be around his support system whatsoever. He got a very good summer of training, and clearly he came into training camp and the preseason with a much maybe a more healthier attitude. He said that he's now, not trying to think past the day or not trying to think about the big picture, that he was taking a real day-to-day approach, to things. And once he got the opportunity, we saw how Victor Arvidsson, had to use basically his training camp to really, really get ready for the season. That was an opening there. Todd McLellen put Gabe Vilardi into a slot, and he went out and won a job. Not only just won a job, but now, as you can see, he's a top 6 player. He's a very, very talented player. The talent's always been there, but now the confidence is paired with that talent, and he's really found a home. And it'll be interesting to see if it's going to be over the long haul. But I agree with you, Eddie. I think so. I think he's now at a place where he's ready to take off.
A little bit more with Eric Stevens from The Athletic. We talked about the good. We're going to talk about the not so good in the Kings goaltending here in just a second. But first, I want to remind you, don't forget to check out Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis from the Locked On experts that only they can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Audacity app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Eric. So one of the concerns I had going into the season was the goaltending situation. Look, I love Jonathan Quick. He's the greatest goalie in the history of the Kings. Could be a Hall of Famer at some point. Certainly his number is going to be in the rafters, obviously, there at the arena at some point, whatever they're calling it then. But, he's a bit older, and we know that Cal Peterson is going to have to carry some of the load, we would think. If it's going to be quick in the playoffs like it was last year, he needs to be as fresh as possible. And so far, it's been a struggle for Cal. Just your thoughts on what's going on in net with the Kings.
Well, they need more saves between both of them. No question. Jonathan gave them enough on Saturday, and I think he's still at a point in his career or whatsoever where he still can do that. But as you alluded to it, for their sake, for what's going to benefit them the most, he can't be playing 60 games. He shouldn't. And Cal Peterson's got to be a key performer for them. And really, it's been, it hasn't really even been an up and down start for him. I mean, it's been sort of a mostly down start, to it. How much of that is mental? How much of that is technical? I think, when you see, Cal in his history, he's generally a very more technically sound goalie. And when that's off, that's when he struggles. And I think in talking with, some people around the team whatsoever, I think that's where he's a little bit off there, with his, with his technique and his structure in net and whatsoever. And that'll be, I'm sure Bill Ranford is obviously working with him on a regular basis. I mean, Bill Ranford has worked wonders with so many goalies, over the years. He's even rehabilitated, some net minders, who have moved on elsewhere or whatsoever. So I'm still confident in the fact that Cal's going to get it, at some point, or whatsoever. But yeah, they need him to start putting together some good performances, because you can't count on, Jonathan Quick is Jonathan Quick, and like you listed those things that and his accomplishments and what's going to be in his future and whatsoever, and his stature in the Kings franchise. But at this point in his career, you can't lean on him for 55, 60 games. You really shouldn't, or whatsoever. And for Cal's sake, I mean, we've talked about it for the last couple of years or so, in terms of him sort of taking the throne from Jonathan. At some point you got to perform. You got to be able to do it, and whatsoever. And this is a year where, he's not only got to bounce back from last season, be better, but kind of start to be that guy. I mean, they're paying him a good sum of money here. The first year of his contract is kicked in here, where he's now a $5 million goaltender. At some point, you're going to need results and good performances. So they need better out of both of them, but I think in particularly they need more out of Cal, so that there will be less pressure on Jonathan, at least over the course of the 82 games here.
And Eric, real quick, I got to ask you, speaking of goaltenders, there was an incident in the Florida game where Matthew Tkachuk, our old buddy, poked his stick through the mask of Jonathan Quick and got him near the eye area. And he ends up getting a 2-game suspension from the NHL Department of Player Safety. I know you wrote about this over at The Athletic. Check out Eric's story on this at theathletic.com. But look, I'm a Kings fan, and I know Kings fans are not happy about this, but 2 games doesn't seem like much. And this is his 3rd suspension. It's not like this is his first time. And we know what Matthew Tkachuk is, and we know what he does. But that was a dangerous play, and it's hard to believe he didn't do that intentionally. So, your thoughts on the 2 games?
Eddie, and I appreciate the plug. Like you said, I did write on it yesterday. Whatsoever. I mean, look, he got off light. Okay, let's make no bones about it. And I wrote that. I mean, it's a slap on the wrist. Okay, whatsoever. And I felt that it was dangerous. That's not a hockey play. Okay, It's not. We know what he is about. We know that that's a part of his game. Getting in the goalie's kitchen, getting under the skin of opponents, riling them up even or whatsoever. We know that's going to be a part of his game, and whatsoever. But there's a line though, and you cross that line when you are intentionally, you're taking the blade of your stick, and I won't go so far as to say turning it into a weapon whatsoever, but you need to be responsible for that. And this wasn't a case of where it was either accidental or it was the result of some back and forth or whatsoever. You could clearly see from the video that there's intention behind that, and that's where it gets dangerous. And what I wrote is that he's too good of a player to do that. He's too good of a player to resort to doing that. And that's what I find with these. I mean, yes, with the spinning wheel of the NHL, NHL disciplinary justice, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 games, whatever you feel it's due or whatsoever. Yes, there's going to be argument over that. It just is. It comes with really all of them. That's how the spinning wheel of justice sort of is, rightly or wrongly, or whatsoever. But we're going to debate it. We're going to argue it or whatsoever. But again, my thing is, why do it? Why? What's the point? You're too good of a player. You don't need to rely on that kind of stuff. You can beat teams with your talent. And Matthew Tkachuk is a very talented player. He's now one of the game's best forwards or whatsoever. There's no need for that.
That is Eric Stevens of The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter, as you can see if you're watching on the YouTube channel, at Iceman Cometh, which is a great Twitter handle. Eric, it was a very enjoyable conversation. Like I said, I know how busy you are covering 2 NHL teams. I can't imagine doing this little show that I'm doing covering 2 NHL teams. So thank you so much for all the information. It was great getting your opinions on all this, and hopefully we can have you on again at some point later in the season.
Great, Eddie. I thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Really appreciate it.
All right. All the best covering both the Ducks and the Kings. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
All right. That was Eric Stevens of The Athletic. And again, we thank him so much for his time. I hope you guys enjoyed that. As we close it out, I want to remind you, if you have any feedback for the show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at Locked On LA Kings, and there's an Instagram page as well at Locked On LA Kings if you're into that. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Eddie Garcia. We'll talk to you tomorrow, preview the upcoming game. We got some other Kings news to talk about as well. But hope you enjoyed the show. And as we close out the show, we always say, go Kings, go.